Okay, in this video we're going to use Grasshopper to build the St. Louis Arch. And here I have an image of the St. Louis Arch that was designed by Errol Saarinen and built in 1965. And if we look at another image, we'll see here that it's basically an equilateral triangle that starts out at the bases and tapers up to the top. And here's a look at it in Rhino and Grasshopper, so we're going to look at making this definition. So I'm just going to start with a new document in Grasshopper, and the first thing that we need to do is we need to make a catenary arch. So I'm dragging down a scribble here just to start organizing this definition. So I'm going to double click and I'll type in catenary arch. Okay, so now in Grasshopper we have a catenary arch component, so I can double click in the canvas and start to type in catenary, and I'll find my catenary arch. And there's a few things that I'll need for my inputs. One is a start point and one is an end point. So I'm going to use a couple of XYZ points, and this point will be placed at 0, 0, and if I zoom in Rhino I can see that. So that'll be my start point of the catenary arch. Now the arch itself spans 630 feet, so I'm going to use the x-axis to make my second point at 630 feet. So I'm going to copy and paste this point, and I'm going to need a number slider. And I'm going to double click on this and set it to integers, and I'm going to make the maximum value. I'm going to make this really large because I'm going to need a large value for my length of the catenary arch. So this is going to be 1500 feet, and I'm going to set this to 630 feet because the St. Louis Arch is 630 feet wide by 630 feet tall. So I'm going to plug this number slider into my X, and I'm going to zoom way out here in Rhino, and now you'll see I have 2 points spaced 630 feet apart. So that's going to be my end point. I'm going to plug that into the B for the catenary arch. Nothing's being drawn yet in Rhino because it's looking for a length. So I'm going to copy and paste this number slider, and you'll have to trust me on this. The arc length is somewhere around 1,495 feet for the arc length. So I'm going to plug this into the L, and just moving this component down, you'll see because my length of my arc is equal to the distance between these points, I get a straight line. But as I start to increase this, I'm getting my catenary arch. So I'm going to set this arc length to 1495. Okay. So now I need an inverted catenary arch to make the St. Louis Arch. So there's a fourth input for catenary arch, which is G. So I need a Z vector for that direction. So I'm double clicking, start to type in Z, and I'm going to plug in my Z vector. And there you go, I have this catenary arch. So I'm going to go ahead and start to organize this definition. I'm going to make a group out of this catenary component because I'm going to need that later on for a sweep one rail. So I'm going to Control G to make a group out of it. Double click on the group boundary and make it a circle. And I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to change its color to be red to scoot this over. So I'll right click on it, color, to scoot this over even more. Okay, and I'm going to change its color to be full on red. And this is going to allow me to do my sweep one rail easier because this is going to be the rail for my sweep. Okay, I deselect that. It's red. I'm going to select this entire set of components, Control G, and make a group out of that. And now I can more easily move this around, and I'm going to set its color, and I'll make this first one green. Okay, so that's the first part of our definition. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is we need to make the base equilateral triangle. So I'm going to drag down a scribble, double click it. So this is going to be the base equilateral triangle, and this is going to be the left side. Okay, so what I need for this is I need a three-sided polygon. So I'm going to go ahead and double click, start to type in polygon. Okay, so I need a radius and the number of sides. And I'm just going to zoom in to 0, 0, where this polygon is being hosted right now. And I'm going to copy and paste a number slider, and I'm going to set it to 3 for 3 sides. So that's going to make this polygon a triangle. And my radius, you'll have to trust me on this one, the radius of this equilateral triangle, which has length segments of 54 feet, so each side of this triangle is 54 feet. So the radius is actually, it's a decimal, so I need to double click on this slider and change it to rounding, and I'm going to up the number of decimal points, decimal places rather. I'm going to up that to 4. And the radius of this, you'll have to trust me again on this, is 31.1769. Okay, and that will give me the size base equilateral triangle that I need. I'm going to need to use this as part of my sweep later on. So again, I'm going to select this polygon, Control G to group it, double click and make it a circle. I'm going to change its color to red. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and make a group out of all these components required to make this polygon. I'm going to select them all, Control G. I'll select it, and I'm going to change the color of this group to blue. So I'm going to right click, color, take the red and the green out, make it blue. Okay, now I need to copy and rotate this polygon to the other side of the arch. So I'll zoom out here so you can see this. So we're going to copy this polygon to the other side, and we also need to rotate it so that the apex of the triangle is facing inward toward the center. So what I'll need to copy is I'll need a move component. In Grasshopper, a move is a copy. Okay, so what am I making? Let's copy and paste this text. So I'm making the base equilateral triangle right. So we can change this to right. Okay, so I need to move or copy this along the x direction a distance of 630 feet. Well, I already have that. I have my 630 feet here in this number slider. I have my x direction from this point. So I can just plug that in here to the move t. And the geometry that I'm copying is this polygon. So I'll plug that in, and there you have it. Now I'm hosting this base equilateral triangle to that point. But now I need to rotate this 180 degrees. So I'm going to double click and bring out my rotate component. And my rotate component needs the input for the geometry, which is this new triangle. Okay, it needs, zoom in a little bit here, it needs an angle of rotation, And notice here that it's showing rotation angle and radians. Well, I don't know the radians, I know the degrees. So I'm going to double click and bring out a radians component that will translate the input from degrees and output it in radians. So it's going to convert degrees to radians. So I'm going to plug that into the angle, and I need a number slider for my degrees, so I'm going to copy and paste one of these, and it's going to be 180 degrees for that angle of rotation. Now if I zoom out, I see a triangle, and as I move the slider I can see it rotating about. Well, right now it's rotating about 0, 0, 0. Well, I need it to rotate it about this point on the right side. So what I'll do is I'm going to take this point component and I'm going to plug it into my plane. Okay, so now this second triangle here is orientated with the right rotation. I can turn off the first triangle by selecting this move component, right clicking and turning the preview off. Okay, so that's my base equilateral triangle right. Keeping this organized, this rotate here is that equilateral triangle, so I'm going to need access to that when I do my one rail sweep. So I'm going to Control G and make a group out of it, double click on it, make it a circle. Gonna scoot this over a bit so you guys can see that. Change its color to red. Okay, so I'm just highlighting in red components that I'm going to need later on. My catenary arch, my base triangle left, my base triangle right. I'm going to make a group out of this, and I'll change its color. This one I'll make yellow, so red and green, make yellow, get rid of the blue. Okay, so the last thing that I need here is I need the equilateral triangle that's going to be at the very top of the arch. And it looks like my rotation got messed up here. So I'll make sure this is 180 degrees. Okay. So need to make the top equilateral triangle. So I'll copy and paste this text. And we'll just rename this to top. Okay, so this top triangle is going to be hosted to the midpoint of this catenary arch. So I need to use an evaluate curve component to get a point placed at the midpoint of the arch. So I'll double click and I'll start to type evaluate, and I'll choose evaluate curve. And the curve that I'm evaluating is coming from this catenary arch, or is the catenary arch. I'm going to plug that into the C for evaluate curve. Now I want this curve to range in values from 0 to 1 so that I can choose 0.5 along the curve for the midpoint. So to make it 0 to 1, I need to right click on the C input, and change it to reparameterize. Now when I use a value from 0 to 1, it's going to be the beginning and the end of that arch. So just going to double click and bring out a number slider because I need it to be decimal. Okay, and I'm going to plug that into the T, and I'm going to bring it back to 0, puts it at the beginning of the arc, go all the way over to 1, and it puts it at the end of the arc. And I need it at the midpoint, so 0.5. Okay, so now I'm going to host a triangle to that midpoint. So I already have a triangle made over here, so So I can select these components using my shift key, Control C, Control V, and move this up over here. Okay, so I need to host the polygon to that point at the middle of the catenary arch. So that's coming out of this evaluate curve. I'm going to plug that into the P for polygon. And there I have my polygon. And in a moment we're going to flip it up so that it's in the right direction, because right now it's flat and it needs to be orientated in an XZ direction. So I'm going to do that with my rotate, and I already have, again, some rotate components down here that I can reuse. So I'm going to take these using my shift, Control C and Control V, and the geometry now that I'm going to rotate is coming out of this polygon. So I can plug this polygon into this geometry for rotate, and I need to set up my angle of rotation to be about that midpoint, and that midpoint is coming out of this evaluate curve. So I'm going to plug that into my plane. Okay, and I'm moving this rotation, and you see it spinning in plan. Okay, it's spinning around, and I'll turn off the original polygon just so you can see that better. Okay, so spinning. So what I can do is I can rotate this about the XZ plane. So I'm going to double click and start to type in XZ, and I'm going to choose an XZ plane, and I'm going to need to link this in from my point and then into my plane for my rotate. Okay, so now you see that this is working. So I need the straight end of this up. So I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees. Okay, and I want it to be a negative 90. So just to introduce another component, instead of changing my number slider to negative 90, I'm going to double click and introduce a negative component, and I'm going to switch this into here. So from here to here, okay, and that makes the rotation negative 90. Okay, so now we have our three triangles that are going to allow us to make a sweep. So again, I'm going to take this last triangle, Control G to group it, make it a circle, make it red, okay, and I'll make a group out of this top series of components for the top triangle. Control G, change its color. Okay, this one I'll make a greenish blue. Okay, so now we're going to start our sweep. So I'm going to double click and start to type in sweep. This is going to be a sweep one rail. So the rail is going to be the catenary arch. So I can zoom out and just move this over by the catenary arch and plug that into the rail. And then I need my section curves. So I'm going to start with my triangle on the left, and I'm going to plug that in. And my next triangle is going to be the top triangle. So I'll zoom in to that one, and I'll plug that one in also. And then the last triangle that I need to plug in is going to be the right triangle. Okay, so that's my sweep. Now we're going to notice some twisting here, and that comes from when we rotated, when we did a copy rotate on that right triangle. Okay, so this thing thins out. So I'm going to need one last component to fix this. which is a flip. I need to flip my right triangle. Okay, so this is my sweep. I'm going to Control G to group that. And I'm going to make it a circle. You guys know what color I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it red. Okay. So that's my sweep, and I'm trying to be very organized because, as you guys know, when you're working in Grasshopper and you come back to look at your definition, it's hard to figure out what you did. So this is going to help me when I come back and look at this. So this is going to be my sweep. Okay, so there's one last component that I need. Okay, so last component needed is a flip. So I'm going to double click and start to type in flip. Choose flip curve. Okay, so I'm flipping this last triangle, this right triangle. So I'm going to plug that in. Okay. Now I need to disconnect this one, this right triangle, the original one. So I'm going to right click on S and I'm going to choose disconnect. Need to scoot this over. Disconnect, and I'm moving my cursor along to see which one it is, which one highlights in red, and it's that one. It's the last one that I plugged in. And I'm going to replace it with this flipped triangle. Okay, so that fixed the arch. Now, something that I haven't done, you see that this is just one size, this arch, is I didn't change the radius of the top triangle. That needs to be tapered in. You'll have to trust me on that. And the radius on that is 9.8150. Okay, there we go. Now we have something that looks like the St. Louis arch.